Problem. Are those numbers simply a reflection of the underlying population? In other words, you get a big place like Leeds, even on a pro rata basis, you should expect to find more COs. Similarly in Bradford, similarly in Sheffield. When you start to get down to places the size of Huddersfield and York, it becomes slightly different. But the only way to tease out the significance of the numbers within the local population is to express those numbers in terms of the numbers of men eligible for military service within those areas. And you can do that calculation quite easily if your arithmetic's up to it. I wouldn't grace it with the title mathematics. It's arithmetic, it's number crunching. Yeah? If you look at the 1911 census, because 1911 census data is broken down by local authority areas, rural districts, urban districts, and all the rest of it per county, and then, as they usually say, broken down by age and sex. Yes? So you'll find that you can calculate on the basis of that the number of men in each local government area between the ages of 18 and 40, therefore the number of men eligible for military service, the start number, if you like. Crude calculation, but nevertheless a useful one. So we then express these CO numbers in terms of that per thousand, and we get something I've called a CO index. When we apply the CO index to that map, yeah, you ready? It becomes different. Okay, so it's a different way of demonstrating the data, and the colours are nicer, but it throws up some strange things. At least I thought they were strange. Huddersfield, still very much, it's in the third category, if you like, of CO index, but it's not anywhere near the red or the purple. Here's a place called New Mill. Those of you who are familiar with Last of the Summer Wine will know where Home Firth is, and New Mill's on the outskirts of Home Firth. Interesting, because it looks like a hot spot. I'm not going to talk about New Mill, but bear in mind it's there. This little place here is called Skelmanthorpe. Very West Riding sort of place name. But the thing that struck me, as it would because it's so big, is this. It struck me first of all because it was so big, secondly because it's in the northern part of the old West Riding, an area I would never have thought in a month of Sundays, as they say where I come from, had anything whatsoever to do with a radical political stance. It's settled rural district, not even urban districts, it's a rural district. So the first question was, what on earth's going on in settled rural district? Come to that in a moment. But the point of the mapping isn't to provide answers, it's to suggest questions. It's to say, okay, this is what the data's showing me in map terms. That's interesting. Let's take a closer look. And there's a limit to the number of places I can take a closer look at in all the counties of England, Scotland and Wales. And I'm rather hoping that people like yourselves are going to take those closer looks at so many interesting places. And of course, their opposite. Those places that don't look that interesting in CO terms. Why is it that place here shows signs of having a fair number of COs, while on the other hand, next door or just down the road, there's another place with a very different CO or non-CO story. So questions. Okay, questions. What's happening in Settle? What's happening in Settle really revolves around two small places. Up in the Pennines there, almost in Lancashire. In fact, it's a bit confusing because Bentham, and here they are, the Low and High Bentham, their postal addresses at the time of the First World War were Lancaster. Took me a while to place them. They're actually in Yorkshire. So on the right side of the Pennines as opposed to the wrong side, as far as we're concerned. But there they are, Low and High Bentham. And of course, looking rather closer at the history of Low and High Bentham, they were early 18th century Quaker settlements in the countryside. This is the Friends Meeting House at Low Bentham. Dates originally from 1713. And the Quakers were well settled in that part of the world, farmers, small industrialists and the like, very important part of the local community. And it's really from the Quaker connection that we find the anti-war movement in the Benthams and therefore, more broadly speaking, within Settle rural district. And in particular, rather like the Robsons in Huddersfield, we have influential local Quakers. Here's Rawlinson Charles Ford, the senior figure in Low Bentham Friends meeting. He also happened to be one of the principal local employers. He had a silk mill in Low Bentham. He was a radical sort of employer in favour of worker participation in the company's management, in favour of profit sharing and so on. And he took and stuck to the Quakers' traditional pacifist stance. In fact, he went rather further than that. He became a key figure in the local branch of the No Conscription Fellowship. And at the Low Bentham Meeting House, he conducted classes for young men locally who might wish to express their conscientious objection against the war at the local tribunal. And many of the men who appeared before the Settle Rural Tribunal in Settle Township were his pupils, I suppose you like to call it. And there's the story I know some of you are familiar with of, on a warm, rather like today, May afternoon, at a tribunal meeting in Settle, after the tribunal had heard a great number of young men from the Benthams talking about their conscientious objection, the chair of the tribunal stopping proceedings when one young man was in full flight and asking him the simple question, "Now then, young man, have you been to one of Mr. Ford's classes?" And of course he had. His case was dismissed. He ended up serving in the non-combatant corps.